Okay, guys, it seems we're good to go. I'm sorry for that video. For both Luigi and myself, these webinars are also new, so it's a little bit of a learning curve as well. Mitch, can you take over and just take it away?
Sure. Good morning or good afternoon to everybody. Today, I'm not sure what introduction was made or anything because this is the first that I've just heard of anybody speaking. But I'm basically going to present briefly about the standardized common service packages on LED or LED. Oh, not Led Zeppelin though. Hold on, that's the wrong one. Hold on. There, LED lighting solutions. Um, if you were here for a presentation on Led Zeppelin, you're in the wrong meeting group. But for the lighting solutions, we'll look at this package together really fast, just a brief overview. I'm not sure if everybody has read through what it was distributed by Luigi, but if you haven't already, that's fine. We'll go through the overview and then you can go back and take a look later. So for this service is basically a guidance and assessment for offices that wish to upgrade to LED lighting. We say specifically LED lighting because it is one of the most efficient technologies that exists now, and it really is becoming the forerunner in lighting technologies. So at this point, it's best just to go with the latest and greatest, so to speak, although it already has been tried and tested. What's important to note here, I know we've already been through, for instance, the solar photovoltaic service package, but generally speaking, when you look at sustainability, the first thing that you want to look at is efficiency first, and lighting is one of the what we would say low-hanging fruits there usually. Often is the easiest to implement, and you get quick gains. So before putting in solar panels or whatnot, you want to reduce the overall load so that way a higher percentage of your solar power can be attributed to your office. So LED currently, as I said, is pretty much the most efficient type of lighting. You can see some numbers here. I won't read through all of them, but basically 75% more than incandescent, 50% more efficient than fluorescent, and it has a much longer lifetime than many of the existing products on the market and technologies. It also reduces cooling costs because it puts off a significant amount of less energy. And as well, it's also less toxic. It doesn't contain mercury, such as compact fluorescent. And it's also quite durable. It doesn't break as easily. And then the last thing is that it works well with sensor and dimming technology. Basically, this means that it has a quick on and off. It doesn't need to warm up, and it doesn't get affected by frequent on-off, such as oftentimes even fluorescent lighting and obviously the incandescent lighting. That you reduce the lifetime when you flip them on and off. So here's just a quick table where you can see a comparison. And so on the left-hand side, we have lumens. This is basically just kind of saying what the lighting amount is in an area. So to achieve 450 lumens, LEDs would have, say, 4 to 5 watts, incandescent 40 watts, and then compact fluorescence around 9 to 13. So you can see it's quite a significant difference even between LEDs and compact fluorescence. It's almost half, more or less, usually down the line. So if you think about that, you're cutting your energy costs in half, even going from compact fluorescence to LEDs. And if you're going from incandescent, then you get a significant amount of savings. This is the business process map, which has been developed for this particular service. It will probably be similar to, it can have similar aspects to other services, but I won't go through everything. But basically, the OMT would kind of initiate this. It could also be initiated by a particular agency to say, hey, we're interested in this, and asking around the other agencies. But it would be probably bringing in the involvement of the OMT initially, or at the start. And the first step, we'll go through each of these steps, but just as an overview, is like a general assessment, and then each agency will kind of do a more in-depth assessment, and then you do a cost analysis, and then you decide if you want to go forward with the project, and then you'll need to do the procurement, and then actually the actual implementation installation. So the first process would be the general assessment, and that can just be somebody that knows the office, administrative people or technicians, and say, do we currently have mostly incandescent or fluorescent lighting in place? If that's true, then there should be probably interest in pursuing a feasibility study or taking an initiative to see if it would be worth doing this project. If you're already on LED or really efficient fluorescent, then it may not be worth it for the particular building agency. Then the other step, as I said, is to see if there's other agencies that may be interested as well, because then we can gain economies of scales and do this once instead of doing it 5 different times with each agency individually, which is the point of the common services package. And then, are there human resources available? We're going to need some people, such as administrative people, potentially technicians, et cetera, in management as well, to make decisions at certain points. And this would also be the point of time where you can start considering who would be the lead agency. And then, will a technical consultant be needed? Sometimes some locations already have maintenance people either contracted or on staff, or they're oftentimes the ICT person is kind of the de facto technician. So if these people feel comfortable with, at least initially, kind of being part of this, then you may not need to bring in external resources, but at some point you may need to, and we'll discuss that a little bit further. And then the financial considerations, obviously, is where we look at, say, does an agency pay for their electricity, or is it all provided by the government? Because it's easier to make a business case where the UN or the agency actually pays, because then you can have a cost recovery and a payback period, so to speak. So at the bottom of each one of these screens, you'll see kind of a resources needed. This one is just kind of more in management and administration, and then semi-technical person to talk about, yeah, we currently have mostly incandescent or fluorescence. Once it's been determined that we should go forward, or an agency or agencies decide to go forward, then you would do a more in-depth inventory of the current lighting system, and that would involve physically going around the building, if it hasn't already been done, and taking an assessment of the current lighting that exists, such as we have in one office, you could have 2 lights, 2 fixtures of 4 18-watt bulbs in each fixture. And so you would use the LED lighting assessment tool, which is the spreadsheet that we provided, and it's labeled as Annex 1, to help complete this. And that's the first table. It's basically looking at your existing one. I'll just flip over to it just so we can take a brief look. So this is an example. I'll make it a little bit bigger so we can see. Okay, so here, ceiling light, 4x18. You say number of fixtures and lights per fixtures and watts per light. So this is where you kind of would dump this information in there. And there are some inputs required from the person working on this, but then a lot of the other stuff is calculated automatically using the spreadsheet. So, and we also include typical averages such as ballast loss. Now, the other thing is some of this terminology may not be familiar, but in the guidelines there we have included a glossary basically to kind of provide some simple definitions for what different terms mean, and so you can always refer to that, or obviously Google as well. So once you've done the baseline assessment, then the next step would be to a needs analysis to say, what do we want? What is our vision for the office as far as the lighting? And some of the factors that you would need to consider are the quality standards, such as, in most countries there's some kind of office standard lighting, or people use the EU to say at a desktop there should be 400 lux, or et cetera, et cetera. And you can kind of decide what standards you want to use or what's applicable for the location. We can also consider, at this point, integrating sensors, and that includes presence and daylight sensors. So basically trying to utilize as much natural light as possible, so then you can get dimming, so you don't have to run the lights as brightly. And also, for instance, in restrooms, when people are not in there, they go out. Same for corridor lighting and whatnot. Ideally, it would be great to have architectural drawings out of this phase, and that would provide a layout and where you would want the lighting, the actual lights, kind of. Or in this office, we would need X amount of lux, and you don't necessarily have to have every light fixture in place at this point, but at least to know what the requirements would be going forward. And at the minimum, you could just complete the lighting assessment tool table 2. We'll look at that really fast. And this is basically saying what we're going to propose to put in. In the guidelines, there is basically a mapping table that says if you currently have this type of lighting, like a typical lighting which you find in most offices, you would replace it with this type of lighting. So it can provide you an idea without having to be necessarily a electrical engineer or technician to be able to kind of map this out and come up with a pretty good estimate for what the project may entail. So as you can see here, the resources, you may need a technical person or somebody that's at least familiar with basic lighting terminology and kind of calculations, but it's not super technical at this point. But at any of these phases, it's going to be up to basically the country office to decide whether or not it should bring in an external person to help consult with this. And that's really depending on the level of comfort for the offices involved. Once the needs assessment has been done, the needs analysis, then the cost-benefit analysis phase can be entered. And that's basically taking each agency individually and also together and trying to determine whether or not it is worth, from a financial standpoint, going forward with the project. And what I mean by that is oftentimes we talk of payback period and net present value. If the payback period, for instance, if there is a plan to stay in the location for, say, 5 years and the payback period is 4 years, then it would make sense to go forward with the project, because after the 4th year, you're going to be saving money. Generally speaking, the UN is in a lot of these locations longer than this period because of ongoing development needs and assistance. So with lighting, fortunately, usually the payback period is pretty short, and which means that generally speaking, it often makes sense to go forward with these types of projects. The other number is the net present value, and that is basically saying if it's what you would get out of the investment if you were able to get all the returns in basically 1 day. If that's a positive number, then you should go forward with the project. Now, this information, as you see here in this section 3, is calculated basically for you. You have to enter in the electricity rate, the currency, and then some of the operating days of the year, and then annual maintenance savings, which we also provide guidelines for that as far as how to estimate that, and then expected increase in electricity costs and discount factor. Discount factor is basically the interest rate. And once entering that in, all these gray cells that you see will be calculated for you. So you can see the total cost investment, and then the simple payback period, and then the net present value. This is an example, a typical example. So in this case, if you plan to stay there longer than 6 years, then you should do the project. The next step is the procurement phase. This is going to involve obviously the administrative person and or a procurement specialist, but probably also at this point you would need somebody technical involved, whether it be from local resources internally or externally, or from resources that, for instance, like at a headquarters, where they oftentimes have engineers working and whatnot. We do provide in the guidelines example technical or sample technical criteria for a procurement exercise for LED lighting. It was one that we use at FAO for our headquarters project. So there's a lot of technical information in there. But again, it would need to be reviewed for the particular location to ensure that the right fits or the right specifications are there. And then the other thing is you can either purchase the products and do the installation together in one procurement. And oftentimes companies can provide, either they say, okay, it would be this much for the products and then this much for the installation, and you can allow them to also bring in a third party for the installation, kind of partner with somebody else. Or you can do two separate procurement exercises, one just for the products and then another one for the service, which is the actual installation. Really, that depends if there's, for instance, local resources that can do installations such as this. We always try to push for keeping these kinds of things local as possible, as far as the human resources that are working on it, because that way, if something goes wrong or if there's issues, they're not flying people in from all over the world whenever there's an issue. You can call up your local resource and have them come over and look at it. In the installation phase, again, here you usually want to have a technical resource that's going to be involved, either somebody internal or a trusted external resource, because you need to ensure that all the standards are being met, the products are what are expected, lighting levels are measured, and everything is as intended and as specified. If there's somebody that is not available internally, then at this point it would be probably recommended to bring in somebody from external to help oversee this. And then that person could also verify a successful completion of contract, which is important in order for all parties to basically to be happy for the arrangement. For operations and maintenance, with LED, it's not that common to have to do much maintenance on these. Once they're there, they usually last. Now they're averaging 30 to 50,000 hours, so a very long time, and we're talking 10 years for a lot of places or more. Depends on obviously how much of the light is used, and with the dimming and sensor technology, this is where you get long lifetimes as well. Initially, usually there's warranties and guarantees, and this is specified often in the procurement exercise, and that usually will be something like 3-5 years, something along those lines. After that time, it's a good idea to have somebody that can maintain them if they need to replace something, or if there's a repair needed, or even just some advice on which way to proceed with the particular issue. But like I said, generally speaking, if done properly, there's little to no maintenance needed for the LED lighting. The other last thing that I'll mention is that was provided in the package that everyone received was there's 2 MOUs that were included, and those are kind of standard MOU agreements that can be used for the LED, but also for other common service packages. And also there's a cost recovery calculation spreadsheet which was provided that can help with determining how each agency will contribute and how all the money is going to be handled. That's all I have, short and sweet. If you have any questions, I'm available to answer.
Okay, thanks, Mitch. Please hold your questions until the last section, the Q&A session. I'll switch to Lars's laptop. Hope sound is much better. Let me first switch screens. Hold on. Where am I now? Sorry guys, I'm switching screens. All right. So let me run through the presentation that I intended to give before Mitch, explaining what exactly the Common Service Package is and what they aim to do. You just saw from Mitch's presentation a lot of tools, baseline assessment, needs assessment, cost-benefit analysis, all these sort of tools, they are available in this package. So basically, what is a standard Common Service Package? The starting point is, you know, I'm imagining you're an operations manager at OMT level, and the OMT decides to explore the possibility to achieve cost savings by replacing all light fixtures in the office with LED lights. Now, operations managers are not typically lighting technicians or electricians. So how would they know what type of LED is suitable for their situation? How would they determine a proposed lighting system, when a proposed lighting system would save them money, how much money it would save them, if it would save them money at all? So it would be nice if these people could then draw on the experiences of a country office that has already gone through the process and learn from these experiences. And this is exactly what a Common Service Package aims to do. It's an off-the-shelf solution that OMTs and UNCTs can use to set up a specific common service without having to reinvent the proverbial wheel. It explains the various steps of the process. It outlines the requirements and/or specifications, or it helps you determine these for your specific context. It also tells you how to go about a feasibility study, as you saw from Mitch's presentation. So you can determine whether or not this exercise is going to give you value for money. And basically, the package is a comprehensive bundle of guidance documents that then further contains tools that help you analyze your present situation and whether the proposed solution is something that's going to work for the UNCT. And it also has standardized templates for your convenience and best practices and lessons learned, so you can read up on all real-life examples from other field offices. So how do we make a standard Common Service Package? UNDG has collected country-level experiences. In this case, we work together with FAO headquarters for this common service. The bottom line is we work with an office that has actually implemented the operational service solution. In this case, it's also our office in Lesotho. After this presentation, they will give a brief presentation. And together we cook this package for you. So 2 cups of best practices and lessons learned. We mix it with a healthy dose of standardizing the approach to the best extent possible. And then we added a pinch of enough leeway to adjust the service solution to your local context. So the requirements of your specific situation and capacity of your resources. As for the reason why we're developing common service packages, many of you are familiar with the UNDG Business Operations Strategy, the BOS, which is the backbone of the operating as one pillar under the Standard Operating Procedures for Delivering as One, also known as the SOPs. As you know, harmonizing business operations under the BOS has 2 major drivers: reducing transactional and operational cost, increasing quality of your operational services. And by implementing these packages, we do just that, reducing cost, enhancing quality. But common service packages also eliminate duplication of efforts. There's no need for you to figure out all by yourself something that has already been done by others. Common service packages enable knowledge sharing and promote good practices across the UN system. And they improve the performance evaluation of your operational services, as they reinforce the M&E mechanisms for harmonized business operations. So, how are the packages structured? They basically consist of 5 main elements. There's a descriptive element, which describes what the service solution is supposed to do. Then there's a business process map, which we also have seen in Mitch's presentation. That sort of outlines the entire process of setting up the common service from beginning to end. Then a technical outline will take the reader by the hand and walk through this process step by step, a sort of how-to guide, if you will. Then there's a governance portion that contains guidance on how the service solution should be managed. And finally, a section on billing, which has guidance on cost recovery among agencies. The initial focus of our common service packages is on particular service lines in 3 main business operations areas. Greening here on the left side, fleet management, and on the next slide we also have ICT. We looked at our completed BOSS frameworks and took a look at their baseline and needs analysis to determine demand for certain services. This slide is an overview of what's been developed so far, what's in the pipeline. We just finalized this package, LED lighting, while vehicle insurance here at the bottom right corner is still under development. In the area of ICT, we have many irons in the fire. These packages are currently being developed in close collaboration with the ICT reference group. We're also working on setting up a common authentication platform called Common Connect, top right corner here. This is not a common service package per se, but more an agreement at corporate level. Every UN staff member would be able to access common service solutions using their own agency-specific login. No need for separate user name and password. This is an enabling technology on which other common service solutions could be based. And the beauty is that tremendous amounts of savings would be generated since there's no separate user account management, as this remains with the staff member's own agency. The common service packages are being developed under the supervision of the UNDG Task Force for Common Service Packages, which reports directly to the UNDG Business Operations Working Group. At present, the task force consists of many agencies. We have UN Women, UNFPA, WHO, FAO, UNODC, WFP, and UNDP. Meanwhile, it should be noted that these common service packages are a work in progress. They are updated as more information becomes available from you guys, from the field level, on what works, what doesn't work, what needs improvement in terms of guidance. So in this context, if you have any questions, issues, or concerns with these packages, or if you have a best practice that you feel might benefit others, please feel free to contact us at this email address. Lars?
No, I just want to add one thing. I mean, these packages, the way we identify them, a lot of people are saying, like, why these? Why don't you do A, B, or C? And what Luigi is actually doing quite well. I mean, we're doing the analysis of the business operations strategies, and we see, okay, which services are most used at the country level. And then through these packages, we hope to make it easier for you that you don't have to start it from scratch, you know, that you have to invest a lot of labor time developing a solution that's already there. And because headquarters here is involved, there's less up and down between the field and the headquarters. So that's a great thing. But it may very well be not all countries are on a BOS yet. I mean, currently it's like around 83 countries, like half the system is working on a BOS or has it already up and running. However, if your country doesn't have a BOS or does have a BOS, but you think, like, listen, this area would be really helpful if a package can be established, in particular if your country already has it. But even if you don't have it, then write to Luigi and make the suggestion. I mean, for us, it doesn't really matter, as long as it adds value for you at the field, and we can scale the solutions in as efficient way as possible. That's what we're trying to achieve. So if you have thoughts on that, drop a mail to Luigi, and we'll see whether we can identify countries who have it, and then establish a package. And this could also be stuff that you actually want to do, but you don't really know how to go about it. This could be quite helpful, so just keep that in mind.
Thank you, Lars. Then now I'll give the microphone to Irakli Jalashvili in the Lesotho office.
Hello, guys.
Hi, Irakli. Over to you.
Okay, do you see my screen?
I just see the generic, there we go. Okay, over to you.
Okay, now it's changing slides, yeah?
Yeah, we see it.
Thank you very much for presentation. Mitch's presentation was very detailed and very nice. There's nothing to add in technical side, so I'll try to explain in strategic level why should we implement LED solutions into our business ops and how we came to this point. The case is that last year business operations BOS industry initiated to go to discuss the opportunities to go in solar. So we invited external parties to discuss opportunities how we can implement renewable energies. But as we figure out from technical side, our costs were such a big amount that we couldn't actually use our territorial capacity to cover the solar panels to get the value of energy what we are consuming. So we discussed many possibilities, and after a month or two working, we started a reverting process actually to shortening our consumption and shortening investment in solar energy itself. So electrical, as you see, the present ongoing projects, we have electrical upgrades, heating and ventilation HVAC upgrades, greening assessment, and solar power initiatives. All these 4 tasks are targeting to reduce electrical consumption at UN House. So this is the only way what we see here to implement solar solutions as efficient as we can. Because normally, after all these initiatives are implemented, we have to make the CBA, how it will be effective in terms of cost and quality to implement solar energy. We'll discuss actually the partly or fully substitution common traditional electrical supply. So fingers crossed that everything will goes well. But in terms of our experience, electrical upgrades and LED implementation, we actually screened high efficiency, cost reduction over 45%, and electrical consumption over lighting for lighting 75%, but for fully electrical consumption it's like 3 to 4%. So the story started with the electrical assessment, and we initiated this to actually invite external party, though later on we used common services package. The demo version was shared through UNDG from Luigi, and it's very helpful package, I should say, because while we transferred data on this standard template, we figure out that all the calculations that we performed ourselves, Excel file generated themselves. So the package is highly recommended, and it's very easy to utilize and to see the effects in real time. It's really nice. So in terms of our electrical assessment, we figure out a number of issues. This is the big electrical consumption, low quality light. Actually, we use the electrical, I don't remember the machine name, and it's actually measures the light density. It looks impaired, so we were targeting as cost reduction, but as well the light quality increase. The second thing was that it was played a huge role in our assessment. Is the high standing charge for electrical counters. Highly recommended. I don't know which country will perform this assessment, but in our case we had 6 electric counters instead of 1, and we had a huge standing charge. While reducing these 5 electric counters, in perspective, we're reducing over $35,000 annual standing charge from expenditures, from monetary expenditures. So I recommend it to actually test and have an assessment if you do have opportunity to reduce such amount of costs. So because of our consumption was high, our emissions were dramatically high, as well as there was no cost-saving opportunity because as much as staff number increased the consumption itself. And as Mitch already mentioned, high maintenance costs in terms of the bulb, traditional bulb fluorescent bulb's lifetime is very short compared to LED. So in this small chart, energy using analysis, we are demonstrating our practice. As you see, and 50% of our electrical consumption is lighting. So this is actually the piece of pie what we targeted. And later on, you can see on this chart that we're reducing from 15 to 4%, 3 to 82. So it's actually in terms of if you see the opportunity to go solar in future, this is only way to decrease initial investment in solar panels as well as in battery banks. So it will dramatically decrease not dramatically, but actually cost decrease would be very noticeable. So the recommendation that we are following is from assessment is LED upgrades. While we're targeting, as I said, at 2 points, it's the quality increase and cost reduction. We're reducing over 75% of lighting costs, and as well we are matching to global standard of room lighting density is 500 lux. Before that, it's always from 360 to 420, depending on where the rooms were located. If rooms are, if the rooms do have windows, it's funny, but in some rooms in this institute we don't have actual access to the windows. So in these cases, it was lower than 400 lux. As well, we are implementing electrical smart meters that will allow each of the agency to monitor their consumption and their emissions. If they do want to benefit with this case, they can, I don't know, utilize these meters well, because you definitely see how much you consume, and I think if you monitor the results, you can even increase the efficiency of that. For example, if you want to implement this, Mitch said the sensors, motion sensors will be very effective because it has over 12 to 15% cost reduction. If somebody forgets light, actually sensors allow us to avoiding these mistakes. And yeah, submetering, I already talked about that. So this is the options that we get. LED option, one of the 3 options that we are going now. This helps us to reduce over 15% of the traditional electrical consumption of nowadays in UNDG. I do recommend as well to develop cost-benefit analysis. It's about the upgrade options, because on market they're available on different kind of LED bulbs and LED technology with the different lifetime and different costs. So in terms of match your budget and increase your efficiency, you can either go to the expensive options where you can where the quality is guaranteed for 5 to 6 with 0 maintenance costs, or you can choose cheaper option and you can go to 3 to 4 years lifetime warranty in terms case. But as let's see the charts in this situation, we have a quite different picture because we reduced the electrical counters and standing charts, and while targeting the LED upgrades, as you see, we almost decrease the electrical costs from 50%. So this is our experience that we wanted to share from this tutorial. If you do have any questions, please let me know. I will be more than welcome to share our experience or our assessment report with you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Irakli. Let me switch back. All right, then let me open up the floor for any questions. Please type in your questions in the questions box. Or you can speak as well, apparently. So far, no takers. In the meanwhile, let me thank the Lesotho office and FAO, Mitch, Irakli. Many thanks for doing this. The first question coming in from Trish Morrow. Are there any special requirements for disposal of leads? Mitch, do you want to take this one?
Sure. It depends on the obviously the country and whatnot, and what the regulations from a legal standpoint are. From an environmental standpoint, they're basically considered kind of electronics, but they do not contain significant traces of I guess you would say toxic chemicals. There's a little bit, but generally speaking, it's not anywhere as significant as such as fluorescent. So they would be handled as kind of like computers and whatnot. I mean, basically your computer, for instance, a laptop has LEDs built all in. A lot of the products that you have on a day-to-day basis have LED already in them. Or they're going with plasma and stuff like that, but it would be handled in a similar fashion.
Yeah, Trish is following up. She says, what if all the fluorescent tubes are removed from a building in Africa with no hazardous waste facilities? How do you dispose of them?
That's an issue, definitely, and it's a good question. What often happens now is that usually either you would stipulate in the procurement and phase that whoever does provides the products or the installations would need to dispose of them in an environmentally safe fashion. And unfortunately, in some places in Africa, for example, that would be they would have to transport them to somewhere else to handle it properly. But that's where a lot of work is being done for the UN and other task force on waste management. And that's something that's being addressed currently by the Sustainable UN Sun Group and the Issue Management Group on Environmental Management. They're kicking off a big project basically this summer, end of the summer, fall, on waste management, specifically in our country offices. And this is one of the topics that they'll be addressing. Unfortunately, there's not a one solution for every location. It really depends on the location, but what you try to do is try to include that in the procurement and the contract to say that the supplier and or the installer has to dispose of it in a proper fashion.
Okay. Thank you, Mitch. I have another question from Rodolfo Buschle. Can you send us the assessment reports? Rodolfo, what do you mean with assessment reports? The actual baseline analysis, needs analysis, and cost-benefit analysis? I think you might be able to speak directly if you unmute your mic, but I'm not sure. If not, type your response in the chat box and I'll see it appear here. In the meantime, let me move to the next question. I have a question from Hesham. How long is LED technology sustainable? In 6 years, another technology will replace it. Would you like to take that?
Is that for me or Mitch?
Yes.
Or, it's, you can apply that to a lot of different technologies, but currently it is the most prevalent. There's not anything that's really emerging right now that looks like it's going to be replacing it anytime soon. Obviously, technology changes so quickly, but regardless, if you're going from 10, 20 watts down to 3, 4, or 5 watts, that's a big change, and you're talking about half the energy. Even if something comes out in 6 years, that doesn't mean you necessarily have to upgrade to that. It's only if that technology gets down to using 0.5 watts or something like that where it would make sense. But LED is already so low that it's going to be difficult to surpass that anytime soon. And LED is improving itself all the time as well. It's getting lower and lower, and more easily, I guess you would say, installed and upgradable. For instance, I didn't mention it, but in the guidelines now they also have LED bulbs that you can basically switch out directly with current tube lighting. For instance, if you have the T4s and whatnot, T8s, they make compatible tubes that you can just basically switch the tubes out, so you don't have to change the fixtures. Those are kind of newer on the market, and there's only a few big players that are really producing them worth the money. But that's something that should be considered as well in the future, and we'll try to include more in the guidelines. It's mentioned in the guidelines, but because it's still a newer technology, it's not available everywhere. But that's an example of where the technology is evolving. But who knows? But at this point, the watts are so low that it would really have to go very low to justify upgrading again in 5-6 years.
Got it. Thanks. Back to Rodolfo Busle's request for assessment reports. He's now saying that he's going to contact Irakli directly. Irakli, you may expect an email from Rodolfo. Also, for everyone, after this webinar, might take 1 or 2 days, but I intend to share all the presentations that we've used, give our contact details out of both Mitch and Irakli. So if you have questions, you can feel free to contact all of us directly. This webinar is also being recorded, and I'd like to also make it available, this recording. But of course, the file is huge. The ultimate intention is to put it on the UNDG website, but I need to figure out a way before I can do that. But yeah, I'll share it later with you guys. Meantime, I don't see any more questions coming in. We're actually right on time, 1 minute to 9 New York time. If there's no more questions, I'd like to close this one off. Lars has a final remark.
And guys, one thing we want to build in is some feedback on the webinars. As said, we're just doing this, or Luigi's just doing this since a couple of months. So, and for us, it's also a learning process. So it would really be helpful if you can drop one or two lines by mail to Luigi on your perceptions. If it's good, it's good. If you got other things that you think like, okay, do this better next time, then please let us know. In the future, we'll build that into the webinars somehow. But it would be very helpful for us to see whether this actually adds value or not. Otherwise, we're wasting everybody's time. I kind of like it, but I might be biased. So that would be nice. Thanks.
All right. Let me thank all of you, Mitch, Irakli, and the audience, of course.
Thank you very much.
Have a good day, good evening, good night.